And let's talk about something that nobody talks about in organizations, and yet it drives almost every promotion decision that gets made. And what I'm talking about is the fact that most professionals believe that they are being judged primarily on their performance. They think it's all about how hard they work or how well they execute, how much they produce. But the truth is this: when leaders evaluate someone for the next level, are they ready to move up? They are not asking, how well are they doing this job? What they are asking is, do I trust them at the next level? They need to know now if they can trust you for that next level. And those two questions, how well are they doing the job and can I trust them at the next level? Those are two very different questions. So here's what happens. When people want to advance, the instinct is almost always the same. They work harder, they double down, they stay later, they say yes to everything, yes to more projects, yes to more work, yes to pitching in. They become the most reliable executor on the team. And then guess what happens? It's a complete paradox. The more you focus on exclusively performance, the more you risk being seen as someone who is perfect for your current role. That's it. In the 1970s, leadership researcher Dr. Lawrence Peter, he described what became known as the Peter Principle. And this was the idea that people are promoted based on success in their current role until they reach a role where the required skills are different. And then more leadership research came later from Ram Charan and the Center for Creative Leadership. They expanded on this and they talked about the leadership pipeline. And what they found was fascinating. In their research, they found that every leadership transition requires a shift in two things: a shift in how you think and a shift in how you operate. So, for example, an individual contributor tends to succeed by doing the work. Whereas the next level up, a manager succeeds by enabling others to do the work. And then if you keep going, a senior leader succeeds by setting direction and making decisions with, and here's the kicker, incomplete information. But here's the problem. Most professionals keep doubling down on the skills that made them successful before. You've got three levels there. And when you move up to the next level, most people keep doing what they did at the last level to make them successful because that's how they know how to develop success. And you may have seen this play out with your own team. The person who's the most technically capable often gets asked to do more of the work. Who knows? Maybe that's you. But they don't necessarily get asked to lead the work. Meanwhile, there's someone else who may actually produce less as an individual, and then they start running meetings, they start framing decisions, they start coordinating across teams. And suddenly that person is the one who feels more senior. A client of mine said something that really stuck with me. She said, Mim, I feel like I'm carrying half the team's workload, but somehow the person who presents our work is the one that leadership sees as the rising star. And the truth is that both of those people are probably very talented. It's simply about signal. My client was signaling execution, while the other person was signaling leadership readiness. So if your performance alone isn't the primary promotion signal, then what are leaders actually evaluating? What are they looking at? What are they looking for? What do you need to know that your boss and the person your boss reports to and the person they report to, what do you need to know about what they are looking for? Well, over many years of coaching leaders and observing promotion discussion across the organizations that I consult in all over the world, there are several criteria that show up over and over. And the thing is, these ones, they don't write them down. People don't write these down, but they very much shape how leaders decide who's ready. So let's talk about these. These are 5 really practically invisible criteria that I see that leaders are looking at, that leaders are evaluating. And the first one is near and dear to my heart. This is presence. It is leadership presence. That's what they look for pretty much first. And I'm not talking about charisma. If you're thinking, well, presence, forget that. I'm not the life of the party. I'm not the person who's the class clown or who lights up the room or who has a lot to say all the time. We're not talking about that charming personality. We're talking about presence. And presence has to do with how you make people feel when you speak, when you're in the room. And the question I would encourage you to ask yourself is, how do people feel when you're in the room, when you speak? And the thing that they're looking for in terms of presence, they're looking for a feeling of that they want to feel steady when you speak. You know how when someone's speaking and you think they're nervous or you think they're rushing or you think they're hesitant, it makes you nervous. It makes you feel if they're hesitant, you're hesitant. Do you sound clear? That helps them feel steadier. Like, well, she's clear, he's clear, okay, they're clear. Maybe I can be clear on this too. Do you sound clear? Do you sound grounded when you're explaining something? Or do you sound hesitant or rushed or uncertain? So many studies, Harvard Business School study research shows that when they evaluate leaders, people are unconsciously assessing two signals. They are assessing your warmth and they're assessing your competence. And the warmth is this sense of, do I trust you? It's do you have my back? Do you have my best in mind? And competence is, can you handle it? Can you handle responsibility? And the great thing about presence is this wonderful combination of both of these. You put your best foot forward in all of your integrity, which inspires trust. And you also demonstrate that as you're speaking, people have that sense of, hey, they know what they're talking about. They sound capable. They're speaking in a capable way, and that makes me feel steady. So when someone explains a complex issue calmly and clearly, people start to think, they could probably handle more responsibility. So that's our first one, is that presence, that leadership presence. That's the first thing they're looking for. The second thing they're looking for is how you think. And specifically, leaders watch how you think about problems. Do you stay at the task level? Or do you connect whatever you're talking about to the bigger picture? It's as simple as that. McKinsey research on leadership transitions shows that one of the biggest differentiators between mid-level players and senior players, senior leaders, is the ability to think two levels up. Not to think at your level, not to even think at the next level, to think two levels up. Not just what needs to get done, but why does this matter to the organization? When you think about something differently, you approach it differently. And then you demonstrate it differently. I mean, if you give an update to somebody and you sound like you're talking about your current level, which is perhaps a more tactical level, you're going to say, okay, I finished the analysis. Whereas if you're thinking two levels up and you're thinking at that strategic level, you're not going to say, I finished the analysis. You're going to go on. You're going to say the analysis clarified the key decision that leadership needs to make next quarter. You're doing the same work. You're just sending a different signal by how you talk about it. You're demonstrating as much as you can that you are thinking strategically. You're thinking bigger. The third thing that I see that they're looking for when they are evaluating and thinking about, are they ready to move to the next level? The third piece is your emotions, and specifically your emotional regulation. This is one of the biggest invisible promotion signals. It shows up when things go wrong because pressure, it reveals your leadership maturity. So if under pressure you are cracking or you are lashing out in some way, you're being triggered in some way, and you're saying things that later on you think, well, I didn't need to really react like that. Well, guess what? People are watching. People are noticing. The Center for Creative Leadership did some research that found that one of the top reasons that leaders derail is not lack of intelligence. It's their inability to handle pressure and their inability to handle interpersonal stress when there's conflict and stress and difficulty, high pressure in a moment. So when they're evaluating your readiness to move to the next level, they're looking at what you do with setbacks. They're looking at how you respond to criticism. Do you come back and are you defensive? Or do you take it and you consider it? One of the biggest things that I have found is when people, and look for this, when something is sent out and someone has a reaction to it, you got to look at their timing. If they shoot an email back right away, that's a sign of a lack of leadership maturity. Leadership maturity says, I take a moment. It says, of course, my button was pushed here when there's been a setback or there's been criticism, or maybe there's some kind of conflict. How do you behave during conflict? And if you come right back, it's typically a sign that you're not reflective, that you're not thoughtful. So you don't want to delay forever, but you want to give that sense that, hey, you've reflected on it, you've thought about it. So when you come back, you demonstrate that this is a reflectful, a thoughtful, a reflective and thoughtful. I've looked at it, I've weighed it, I've considered it, and I'm not just reacting out of my emotions. You got two people who face a problem, and one person becomes defensive, whereas the other person says, let's step back for a moment and look at what happened here. Leaders remember that difference. I was in a meeting in the past, I was in a meeting with, at that point, someone who was a colleague of mine and, well, several people in the organization that I was in, including someone who was quite senior to my colleague and to myself at this time. And the senior person laid out something that was going to need to be done. And clearly, very clearly, this colleague, it really hit a trigger for them because they shot right back. Without batting an eye, they shot right back a defensive, critical response, really reaction to what this leader had said. And it was actually quite shocking in the room, and there was silence because it was so barefaced coming against someone without having done the thoughtful reflection. And of course, in the larger context, what was interesting was this was a really smart colleague of mine and someone who was very much on the radar as someone for the next level. That situation did not go well. Ultimately, I'll say over the next few months, you saw that star that had been on the rise, that star went on the decline, and they ultimately left the organization. That kind of reaction in the moment tells people, you are not ready for leadership. Emotional regulation. The fourth area that they are looking for, you're being judged on when you're thinking about and hoping for, aiming for the next level, is simply how clearly you communicate. You got to think about what leadership is. Leadership is largely helping other people understand something, helping people understand what needs to be done, helping people understand what matters most about it and what makes that matter, helping people understand changes, helping people understand how to navigate when there's agility that's required because there's something that's shifting right underneath our feet. Staying current with people and using all the things we've already talked about, that emotional regulation, now clearly communicating. Harvard Business Review research found that one of the strongest predictors of perceived leadership capability is the ability to communicate your ideas succinctly, decisively. You're not going to talk more, you're going to talk cleaner. So you're not going to state things in question form. You're going to state them decisively. So, for example, for someone who walks in the room and says, I just wanted to share a few thoughts on where we are with the project, versus the key issue is timeline risk. Here's what I recommend. So much more succinct that second time around. The first one is very meandering. That first one is very wandering. The first one shows I didn't really think for a moment and collect my thoughts so that I could be prepared for you and I could lay things out in a way that makes it easy for you to take in. Instead, I'm dragging you by the hair and I'm dragging you into my meandering thought process. Good luck to you in figuring out what I'm trying to say. So you want to really think ahead of time if you want to signal leadership readiness. And the fifth area that you want to look at, again, that invisible criteria that they are judging you against, is impact. And it's more than impact, it's the visibility of impact. This one, I see people misunderstand this so much because people think, I'm doing so much work here. I mean, isn't it obvious that I am pulling my weight and then some? And if you want me to go around and brag about it, then forget it. That's not who I am. That's not my identity. And they'll think it's bragging. They'll think it's being self-centered, bringing up the visibility, to raising the visibility of the impact you're having. And I want to shift that thought. It's really not about bragging. It's really about helping leadership, because leadership needs to understand, for them to make the right decisions moving forward, they really need to understand the value that your work creates. If they don't really see clearly that value, they might make a choice around work, around personnel, that is going to backfire on the organization. They need to understand why your work matters. MIT did some research that shows that leaders often rely on not just raw performance data when they think about bringing some up to the next level. They think about narratives about contribution, not just the performance data. So in other words, if the story of your impact is not visible, then your work becomes invisible. So don't think meandering, but do think in more narrative form. So rather than come in and say, I completed the analysis, you're going to say, well, this analysis clarified the client's decision path and it prevented a potential revenue risk. So you did the same work, you're just talking about it differently, and you're clarifying and you're making visible the impact. I had a client, Daniel, came to me frustrated. He'd been working hard for years, delivering in excellent ways, delivering excellent work. But promotion kept passing him by, and he was getting frustrated, which is why he was talking with me. And when we looked at what was happening, and I dug into it, and I did some internal research, he gave me leave to do some internal research for him, and I asked him about what he was doing and the feedback that he was getting. The issue was not his competence. He was very competent. It was signaling. It was what he was putting out there. Daniel was so good at execution, and he was so focused on execution that he really rarely spoke up in meetings. He rarely framed the strategic tie-in or implications of his work. And it tended to be, aside from meetings, he waited for direction. Daniel was not the kind of person who, to that point, had seen himself as someone who, I'm going to pick up and be proactive about coming up with what should be the next thing that I do. He waited for direction. He knew that there were things the organization was trying to get done, and he was at their service. So the downside of that, it's great to be at the service because that is needed. But the downside of that is they're not seeing you as a leader. They're seeing you as a doer. And so he needed, of course, to keep his excellence and execution. That's absolutely your foundation. But you need more. And so we went to work, and we took the next few months and we worked on framing up his updates strategically. So he was talking about what's the tie-in to the bigger picture. We talked about speaking, and he practiced speaking up earlier in meetings and speaking up at all because he hadn't been speaking up. But you got to speak up, and you got to speak up earlier. And then we worked on how can you make the impact of your work visible? What do you say? Who do you say it to? And we got him not constant about doing this, but consistent about doing this. And within a year, his boss said something really interesting to him. He said, over the last year, I've started to see you differently. Of course, Daniel was the same person. He was just sending different signals, and he was doing it not through wishing, not through hoping, not through sort of or kind of. He was doing it through very concrete means. The most important shift is that leaders don't promote people simply because they perform well. They promote people that they trust at the next level. They promote people that they already can trust at the next level. They're not at the next level yet, but they trust them by what they see now. And trust at that level, it comes from signals like your presence, these 5 things we've talked about, your presence, your judgment, your strategic thinking, your communication, the visibility of your impact. So here's something to try out this week. Before your next meeting or before your next update, ask yourself one question. What signal am I sending now? Am I signaling execution, or am I signaling leadership readiness? And that small shift, and then making a choice of what you can do, how you can shift what you're going to say to signal leadership readiness. And just that little change from doing the work to framing the work, it's one of the fastest way to change how people perceive you. And we're going to talk a lot in upcoming episodes that rising, it's not about waiting for someone to give you leadership. It's all about learning how to show it.